Excuse me. My eyes are up here. Hello? Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Crue Trime. Crue Trime, Crue Trime, Crue Trime. If you are new here, hello. My name is Sarah, and what I do here is tell you a terrible story to derail your mental wellness and put on my makeup at the same time. If you're a weirdo like the rest of us and you're into that sort of thing, you are in the right place. You should really subscribe. Go ahead. I'll wait. So today's story is one that I'm sure many of you might think that I have covered already, but it's only because there's like a million documentaries and docudramas that are streaming like right now. So the story's getting a lot of attention. But that said, not everybody has like a solid 6 hours to dedicate to watching all of these episodes. Am I right?
I have to return some videotapes.
I'm gonna give you just enough to fill you all the way in while you're cooking dinner, while you're folding laundry, while you're on your lunch break. This is the story of the Menendez brothers. If you're interested to know any of the makeup that I use, because I don't talk about it, just look in the description box, everything is linked. Just before midnight on August 20th, 1989, 21-year-old Lyle Menendez called 911. He was crying hysterically and he sobbed to the dispatcher, "Someone killed my parents."
Beverly Hills emergency.
Yes, police.
What's the problem? What's the problem? What's the problem?
Someone killed my parents.
Pardon me?
Someone killed my parents.
What?
We have units around. What happened? Who shot who?
I don't hear anything. I just came home.
You came home and found who shot?
Mom and Dad.
Lyle was barely able to speak. He was pretty inconsolable. His brother, 18-year-old Erik, can be heard screaming in the background. When the police arrived at the Spanish-style Beverly Hills mansion at 722 Elm Drive, Lyle and Erik were outside weeping on the lawn. Their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, had been in their den watching TV where they were both shot dead where they sat. There had actually been so many shotgun blasts in that room that blood and guts were literally dripping from the walls and the ceiling, and the investigators actually had to use umbrellas to keep stuff from falling on their heads. Other than this truly gruesome crime scene, the rest of the house was untouched. Like nothing had been taken, it hadn't been ransacked, there was no sign of forced entry, nothing. This led police to theorize that whoever shot the couple must have known them, and they must have wanted to send a message. Was this like a bad business deal gone terribly wrong? I mean, it was all like, kind of like mob vibes, you know what I mean? I mean, yeah, it was a really like messy crime scene, but all of the shell casings from the shotgun had been removed. All right, if you don't want to hear details about injuries, fast forward to this time. So 45-year-old Jose had been shot 5 times, once at point-blank range in the back of his head, which immediately killed him. He also had 4 other shotgun wounds to his torso, arm, and leg. The wound to his head was so catastrophic that it literally blew his face off. It's probably in poor taste, and if you don't get a little chuckle out of it, you are in the wrong place. 47-year-old Kitty had been shot 7 times. She had been found lying down on her right side in front of the sofa. She had shotgun wounds to her head and face, leg, hand, wrist, and shoulders. The wound to her right cheek was made at point-blank range. The thumb on her right hand had been nearly severed, which indicates a defensive wound, like she'd reflexively held her hand up to shield her face. So that's a lot. That's a lot. So how did we get here? Who are the Menendez family? I'm glad you asked. Jose Enrique Menendez was an incredibly successful businessman, most recently as the chief operating officer at RCA Records, where he expanded the Latin music catalog for the company, and he helped sign really successful acts like the Eurythmics, Duran Duran, and the mega popular Menudo. Jose was born in 1944 in Havana, Cuba, to an affluent family. His mother was a Hall of Fame swimmer, and his father was a former soccer star turned accounting mogul. When the political climate in Cuba went to shit under Fidel Castro, Jose was about 16 years old, so his father sent him to the United States to live with family. Jose was scrappy and driven, and he eventually earned an athletic scholarship to Southern Illinois University, where he met a beautiful co-ed named Kitty Anderson. Mary Louise Kitty Anderson was born in 1941 in suburban Chicago to Charles and May Anderson. Kitty was a pageant queen, and she won the Miss Oak Lawn pageant in 1962 and caught the eye of a handsome accounting major named Jose. Kitty was 2 years older than Jose, but she was immediately obsessed with him. In 1963, a 19-year-old Jose and a 21-year-old Kitty got married, although their parents didn't really approve. They moved to New York City, where Jose finished school at Queens College. Kitty worked as a school teacher, and they eventually moved on to Princeton, New Jersey. Over the next couple of years, they grew their young family, welcoming 2 sons. Joseph Lyle was born on January 10th, 1968. Erik Gaydon was born on November 27th, 1970. So as I mentioned, Kitty initially worked as a school teacher, but when the boys came along, Jose wanted her to stay home to raise them. And she did. She spoiled the boys like crazy, and Jose worked long hours and traveled a lot, which ended up paying off because the family was rich. Jose moved up that corporate ladder quickly, proving himself a relentless business shark. And by age 35, Jose was the executive vice president of Hertz Global Holdings, which is a subsidiary of RCA Electronics, and then he later transferred to the records division. So Kitty and Jose were very present in the boys' pursuit of sports, and Jose was very focused on setting the boys up for success. He enrolled them in the very prestigious Princeton Day School. Jose was demanding and very competitive. He also had the boys playing soccer and tennis pretty much as soon as they could walk. And meanwhile, Jose, as I mentioned, was very successful in business, and he was raking in the cash. In 1986, Jose moved the family to the West Coast, settling in Calabasas to build their dream home. Jose moved on to a video distribution company called Live Entertainment. And Lyle, by this time, the boys are a little older. He was a top-rated tennis player. He had actually graduated from high school before they'd made the move to California, and he was currently enrolled at Princeton University. And Erik transferred to Calabasas High School. Lyle was actually not a good student, and he didn't go straight to Princeton. He did a little bit of community college first and then transferred. Also, Jose was dumping a lot of money into Princeton, so there's that. Erik and Lyle didn't want for anything. Jose and Kitty gave them everything they could ever want. Nice clothes, nice cars, they went to great schools, lived in a beautiful home, they didn't have to have jobs. Although, they did have to hear lectures from their father about hard work, and that was so annoying. In the summer of 1988, Erik and Lyle started stealing. Little assholes. What they would do is break into the homes of their friends' parents. They were pretty amazed to see that, these people would just keep jewelry and large amounts of cash just kind of hanging around. So they just helped themselves to it, to the tune of $100,000. I mean, it gave them easy money, and they didn't have to get hassled by their dad, for asking him for money. But these dum-dums were immediately caught. Jose, of course, was furious. He didn't want his spoiled brat shithead sons ruining their own lives this early on, particularly Lyle, who was a legal adult at this time. So he demanded that the boys return the money, whatever was left from what they spent, and the jewelry, and they did. Jose cut a check to cover the losses of these burglary victims, whatever was not returned, and he cut a deal with the district attorney's office to absolve Lyle of any wrongdoing, as an adult. Everything fell on Erik, but all he had to do was a little bit of probation, like community service. Both Erik and Lyle were required to undergo some counseling, and the brothers started seeing Dr. Jerome Oziel. So Kitty and Jose. Kitty's entire life revolved around Jose. They were always together, it seemed, and Kitty was always right by his side. But things in the Menendez family weren't perfect. Jose was very much like a macho kind of a guy. Very cutthroat, strong-willed. So traditional gender roles were very important to Jose. Kitty was to be a mother and a wife, and Jose, as the breadwinner, could just, do whatever the fuck he wanted. Or whoever he wanted. And he did. So it was kind of a worst-kept secret that Jose had a mistress, or 2 or 3. And that was really hard on Kitty. Also, her sons were turning out to be like first-rate shitheads. So Kitty turned to alcohol and pills, and even attempted to take her own life on a couple occasions. In 1987, Lyle was enrolled at Princeton, but he barely completed his first semester before he was busted for plagiarism, having copied his lab partner's homework and turned it in as his own. Jose, of course, was pissed. He showed up trying to use his money and influence to get Lyle out of it, but the best they could do was suspend him for a year. At that point, Lyle was embarrassed, right? So he just wanted to transfer to UCLA, but Jose had his sights firmly set on Ivy League. Thank you very much. So Lyle went home to California and hung out for a year. Now, Erik idolized his big brother Lyle. Erik played tennis, just like his big brother. They were very tight. They were really like 2 peas in a pod, and otherwise kind of standoffish with other people. 2 short years after moving to Calabasas from New Jersey, Jose purchased a 9,000 square foot Spanish mansion in Beverly Hills for $4 million. It was closer to his business dealings, it was definitely in a very coveted zip code, and it was far away from this Calabasas burglary gossip. So Erik transferred to Beverly Hills High School and attended with such notable names you might have heard of, like Angelina Jolie. Lyle eventually returned to Princeton in 1988, but he immediately got himself back in trouble with some stupid party he'd had that caused property damage, something about pool tables or something. But it did not stop Jose from bailing him out of all that, and Jose also purchased a condo outside of Princeton so Lyle could focus on his studies, and it also gave him and Kitty a place to stay when they came out to visit. Although by this time, Lyle was flying home to California pretty much every weekend, and he was living in the guest house behind the pool. In the spring of 1989, Erik graduated from Beverly Hills High School and waited to begin college that fall at UCLA. Then, Lyle's girlfriend, Christy, came up pregnant. Oops. Well, that simply would not do, so Jose cut her a check for $100,000 in exchange for an abortion. Tensions in the Menendez house increased, but it was also just sort of par for the course. Over and over, Jose came to the rescue of his shitbird sons, saving them from themselves, from their own short-sighted, entitled behavior that he helped create, but his patience was wearing thin. After this plagiarism thing and the burglary thing and this just embarrassment after embarrassment after embarrassment, Jose decided to disinherit them, cut them out of the will. He drafted an updated version that left everything to Kitty. Seeking some restorative family time, Jose, on August 19th, 1989, chartered a boat from Marina del Rey to take the family shark fishing, it's a weird choice, right? Anyway, it seemed like he wanted to pull the family together with an outing, but Kitty got seasick and the boys just spent the whole time to themselves, having absolutely zero interest in fishing for anything. Fast forward to the next evening, Lyle and Erik had gone to the movies, and when they got home just before midnight, they walked into a horror scene and called the police. And now we're back to the beginning of the story. So when the police arrived, Lyle and Erik are inconsolable. They They were taken to the police station for questioning, and Erik was so emotional, like fragile, unable to collect himself. They couldn't get anything out of him. Lyle was a little bit stronger. You know, he was able to keep his emotions under control, and he was also able to comfort his brother, you know, enough so that they could lay out a timeline. They told the police that they had played tennis earlier that morning at the house, and then they went shopping at the mall together. Then later that evening, they went to go see a movie in Century City, which is really close to Beverly Hills. After that, they met a friend at the Cheesecake Factory in Beverly Hills, and then after that, they decided to, I guess, keep the party going, and they wanted to buy some alcohol. Lyle's license had been suspended, a separate issue, I guess. So they needed Erik's ID, his fake ID, that said he was old enough to buy alcohol. So they needed to go back to the house. So they get back to the house, and that's when they found their parents. 4 days after this incredibly gruesome, shocking murder, the boys went on a spending spree.
Are you fucking kidding me?
Jose had a personal life insurance policy to the tune of $650,000. So that was sort of step one. Erik and Lyle each bought themselves a Rolex watch. Those are like $15,000 each. Erik bought himself a Jeep Wrangler. Lyle bought a Porsche 911 Carrera, and at the time, $65,000. You're a lot more now. Menendez estate was estimated to be worth about $14 million, and once all the loans and taxes were accounted for, Erik and Lyle each stood to inherit about $2 million each. Some of the research indicates that the boys were surprised that it wasn't a higher number and actually insisted that their dad had hidden money in like some offshore bank accounts or something. None of that was ever substantiated. I think these boys were just a little delulu. Grieve in your own way, I guess.
Okay.
On August 25th, 1989, an elaborate memorial service for Jose and Kitty was held at the Directors Guild of America in Los Angeles. A more traditional church service was held at the University Chapel at Princeton a few days later, where Lyle delivered like a 30-minute eulogy to his parents. Kitty and Jose were laid to rest at a plot in the Princeton cemetery that Jose had purchased years earlier. And the Princeton cemetery is the final resting place for many notable figures in American history like Aaron Burr, President Grover Cleveland, and many, many Princeton scholars. Well, the boys decided that they could not continue living inside that house, which understandable, right? So they rented side-by-side condos in a Marina Del Rey high-rise building. Now, this was after they had spent a fair amount of time living in luxury suites in Beverly Hills hotels. They also had bodyguards on staff, you know, in case the mafia came back to try and pick them off. Erik hired a professional tennis coach and entered into a bunch of international tournaments. Lyle decided to establish the Menendez Investment Enterprises, renting office space in Princeton and recruiting other Princeton bros to join in on this business opportunity.
Gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss.
It failed immediately. Lyle had been using Jose's American Express to fund everything, and eventually that bill came due, and it was a whopper. Also, nobody in his little investment group, including Lyle, knew how to run a capital business venture. Undeterred, Lyle decided he was going to follow his dream of owning a restaurant. So he bought this well-known chicken wing place, like local to the area. He paid more than double the market value, first of all. He changed the name, which was also a stupid move because the place was established and beloved,
I would say.
And blah, 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 it failed spectacularly. Erik and Lyle started to butt heads over how quickly they were blowing through this money, and cracks between them started to form. So, on October 31st, 1989, Halloween, Erik booked an appointment with Dr. Oziel, this therapist that he'd been seeing since back in the Calabasas robbery days. He told Dr. Oziel that he was depressed and he was having suicidal ideations and nightmares, and oh yeah, me and my brother killed our parents.
That escalated quickly.
So Erik explained that he just really was falling apart and he needed somebody to talk to, and then he went in graphic detail. He described how he and his brother had gotten away with murder. So what he described pretty much was like, their dad was an asshole, you know, domineering, demanding, just like a nightmare. Also, they knew that their dad was gonna disinherit them. He had recently, this is great, this part is bonkers. He had recently watched this movie, like this mini-series called The Billionaire Boys Club, which was actually based on people they knew in real life. And he attended Beverly Hills High School with one of these family members. But anyways, so it's based on a true story, of course, and it tells the story of a super greedy, ambitious investor who kills his ops and almost gets away with it. They were, I guess, inspired to kill their father, Erik and Lyle. But they also knew that they were gonna have to kill their mom. So they planned. They drove down to San Diego, they bought guns. It took them a few tries because I guess initially they wanted handguns and those have a waiting period. And then there was another place that required more than one form of ID and they didn't have that. They eventually found a place that just sold them 2 shotguns, easy peasy. Then on the evening of August 20th, they shot their parents and their family home. They wouldn't have to worry about fingerprints or any of that stuff because they lived there. They were there already. After they did the deed, they changed their clothes, they drove out to Mulholland Drive and dumped the guns in some random canyon, and then they drove to some random gas station dumpster and dumped their bloody clothes and the shotgun shells. When they went home, they were surprised that there was no police there. Apparently nobody in the neighborhood heard or cared about the 12 gunshots they fired that night. With this information, Dr. Oziel immediately had Erik call Lyle to come to the office and join this session. Now, Dr. Oziel, this board-certified mental health professional, is bound by patient-provider privilege, meaning that anything discussed cannot be revealed to anyone ever, even the confession of a crime. There are, of course, some exceptions, including if the patient presents a danger to themselves or others and some other stuff, but in this case, the crime had already occurred. Also, just because a person says a thing doesn't make it true. You know, it could be a delusion. When Lyle showed up, he was not happy at all that his brother had spilled the beans, and Lyle definitely threatened Dr. Oziel. He said he would straight up kill him if he'd ever told anyone anything. And that threat would have allowed Dr. Oziel to speak to the police. But did he go to the police? No. What he did instead was begin recording their sessions, you know, in case he wanted or needed to use them. Also, he told his girlfriend about these confessions. Girlfriend, like mistress. This was a married person, Dr. Oziel. Okay, so the Menendez brothers have fully confessed to this therapist who they've also threatened, so should go to the police, but doesn't. The police don't have any leads at all, and the brothers are spending money like it's never gonna run out. Then, fast forward to March 5th, 1990. This is like a solid 6 months after the murders. And this is a little nugget to the story that I did not realize until I started looking into it. These brothers had truly gotten away with it, and I think they would have totally gotten away with it if it wasn't for Dr. Oziel's girlfriend. 37-year-old Judalon Smith was a patient of Dr. Oziel's that they had inappropriately romantically entangled themselves. It was a mess. They were having an affair, and in true liar McLiarson fashion, Dr. Oziel was telling her that he was going to leave his wife, blah blah blah, boring, boring, boring. But Dr. Oziel told Judalon about this confession. Okay, so on the day that Erik dropped this bombshell on Dr. Oziel, he wasn't set up to make audio recordings in his office. So when he had Erik call Lyle to come join the session, he also broke away and called Judalon and asked her to come over and like lurk in the lobby and listen in case things went sideways. She could call for help, I guess. She heard what was said in that room, and she's not a doctor. She doesn't have to keep the confidence of the patients. You know, months later, when Dr. Oziel would not leave his wife for his girlfriend and they broke up, guess what she did? She took all her little secrets straight to the police. And if you're asking me, it's not because she was some concerned citizen with this interest in serving justice. I think she just wanted to get Dr. Oziel in trouble, and I think she was an opportunist, just like Dr. Oziel wasn't recording those sessions for any other reason than blackmail. He was offering them investment opportunities to be a business partner with him. Stop. Stop it. So Giesleman had gone to the police and told them all about this confession that she had heard, and he was continuing to see these brothers and record their sessions, so there was probably a lot of information. So on March 8th of 1990, the police issued a search warrant for Dr. Oziel's home and office. They wanted those tapes, man, and they got them. Would they be able to use them in court? That's another story, but we'll come back to that. Okay, so on that same day, but later in the afternoon, Lyle had gone to lunch at the Cheesecake Factory with a friend, or was about to go. These guys loved the Cheesecake Factory, which is so weird to me. Here's a hot take. If a restaurant's menu is like 17 pages long, none of the food is good. None of it.
I said what I said.
So Lyle's on the way to the Cheesecake Factory, and the police surround him, arrest him and his friend, and take them down to the police station for questioning. Erik was actually in Israel at the time playing in some tennis tournament. So when he heard about Lyle's arrest, because of course it made the news and was everywhere, he flew back home immediately, and he was intercepted at LAX and taken to the LA County Jail. So absent the confessions to the therapist, the police didn't have any physical evidence that would tie these brothers to the murders. There was no murder weapon. The brothers lived in the house, so their fingerprints were on everything, so it didn't matter. And on the night of the murders, the investigators didn't test their hands for gunshot residue.
Big mistake. Big. Huge.
But they kept digging into the details of these therapy recordings, and they finally narrowed down where the guns might have been purchased from. And spoiler, they figured it out. So on March 26, 1990, the Menendez brothers were arraigned for the murders of their parents, and they both pled not guilty. Leslie Abramson was hired to represent Erik, and Jill Lansing was hired to represent Lyle. Leslie Abramson was a very experienced defense attorney with a big personality and a very high success rate. Lansing was a little bit more low-key, but effective. In a court hearing held on August 6, 1990, the judge in the case ruled that the tapes, the recordings from the Dr. Oziel therapy sessions, could be admitted into evidence. He said that Dr. Oziel had reasonable cause to believe that the brothers constituted a threat, so disclosing their communications did not violate patient privilege. The defense filed an appeal, and the decision was overturned. But then the prosecution appealed the appeal, and the decision that was made quoted parts of the recordings, and that was the first time that the content of these recordings became public. The contents being the confession to the murder. Cat's out of the bag, boys! The California Supreme Court later ruled that only some of the tapes could be used as evidence in the court case, and the one that was the most damning was not included. Whiplash. Are you guys keeping up? So it took a while for the trial to get going, and meanwhile, Erik and Lyle were sitting in jail. Erik had a pretty hard time with being in jail and being away from his brother, and he started having suicidal thoughts again. He began seeing a priest, and he started talking about his childhood and the abuse that he and Lyle endured while they were growing up. That evolved into weekly therapy sessions with Dr. William Vickery, who was a very highly regarded psychiatrist. And what was revealed in those conversations laid the groundwork for the defense's strategy. On December 8th, 1992, the Menendez brothers were officially indicted by the Los Angeles County Grand Jury on charges that they murdered their parents while lying in wait, meeting the special circumstance that would make them eligible for the death penalty. The actual trial kicked off on July 20th of 1993, 4 years after the murders, and Lyle was now aged 25, and Erik was 22, and while it was one trial, each brother had their own jury. So sometimes both juries were in the room, sometimes it was one or the other, which means the outcome could be different for both of them. The prosecution laid out a very strong case based on the forensic evidence. The gruesome and absolutely brutal crime scene, the 6-month spending spree that began just days after the murders, and the brothers' history of lying and getting away with it. These were prolific liars, manipulators, with a real interest in self-preservation, about 4 million reasons. The defense told the jury that Erik and Lyle Menendez killed their parents, and they did it because they were afraid.
There is no issue as to who killed Jose and Mary Louise Menendez. Why they were killed is what the focus of all of our evidence will be on.
It's no secret that Lyle and Erik were born into privilege. Money was not a motivator in this case because it was always around. Just days before the murders, Erik confessed to his older brother Lyle that their father had been sexually molesting him for 12 years.
You telling Lyle what?
My dad had been molesting me.
Lyle was destroyed, not only to learn that his brother had suffered this disgusting abuse, but because it was the same thing that happened to him when he was 6 to 8 years old.
I just told him that I didn't want to do this, and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me, and he loved me.
Was that important to you, that he loved you?
Yes.
Jose Menendez ruled their home with an iron fist, demanding compliance, subservience, and total secrecy of these perversions. But no more. Lyle stood up to their father, to which Jose essentially laughed in his face and threatened him. The brothers had never revealed what was going on, even to each other, let alone some random therapist. So that explained why they never came forward to the authorities with this information until after the murders. So this trial was very dramatic. The state poked holes in everything the defense tried to lay out, and Dr. Oziel testified and was shredded by the defense for his affair with this Judalon Smith and other improper conduct. Both of the brothers took the stand and delivered emotional testimony about this lifetime of abuse that they'd endured at the hands of their horrible father, and right under the nose of their mother. Lyle also alleged that his mother was sexually inappropriate with him when he was between 11 and 12 years old. Erik told the jury that he believed their parents were going to kill them, and they couldn't run away because their dad was so powerful and influential. Under cross-examination, Erik's story started to fall apart. He couldn't recall details about the gun purchase. He denied knowing about being disinherited, like removed from the will, even though in that same trial he had already testified to it. But then experts for the defense testified that the brutality and overkill nature of the crime indicated a lack of planning. So I'm kind of leaving out a lot of the details here, but the point is the strength of the case was swinging wildly between, whoa, they really did it, or whoa, I feel really bad for them, what a terrible life. So when the jury was ready to begin deliberations, the judge actually gave them very specific instructions. They could choose one of 4 options. They could find them guilty of first-degree murder with the special circumstances, guilty of second-degree murder, guilty of voluntary manslaughter, or guilty of involuntary manslaughter. There was no option for an acquittal. After deliberating for 16 days, the jury returned a decision on January 13th, 1994. They were deadlocked. Hung jury. They couldn't reach a decision on any of the options, and the judge had to declare a mistrial. They were going to have to start all over again. The new trial was set for the summer of 1995, and here's the thing. When you get a second bite of the apple, you don't miss. This time, the brothers were tried together with one jury. Leslie Abramson stayed on to represent Erik, but Jill Lansing jumped ship and they went with a public defender instead. Equal parts, she didn't feel like she could defend him, and also couldn't meet that fee anymore because the Menendez estate had been completely drained. The prosecution spent a lot of time analyzing some of the missteps that they had made in the original trial, and they decided to leave Dr. Oziel off the witness list, but they did play the recordings of the therapy sessions. And they focused on the brothers' greed and urgency to process their inheritance, and the letters that Lyle had written over the years to try to wrangle up witnesses with very specific instructions on what they're supposed to say. Testimony about the alleged childhood sexual abuse was limited by the court. Erik testified that his parents were violent and he and his brother feared that they'd be killed if they revealed the truth about the abuse. The prosecution essentially called him a liar. Lyle decided to not testify because the prosecution was able to use evidence from the first trial to impeach his testimony. The judge limited the number of witnesses and experts, saying that the parents' alleged maltreatment of the brothers was irrelevant. The judge also ruled that there was insufficient evidence that the brothers were in imminent danger, so they were not able to use this imperfect self-defense. It goes on, but basically the judge was not interested in any defense legal gymnastics. He was not having it at all. No dramatics, no shocking displays of salacious allegations, just Plain facts, Jack.
That's on period!
In the closing arguments of February 29th, 1996, the prosecution explained that Lyle and Erik blamed their victims. They put their own parents on trial. They created a very clever abuse excuse, and they told whatever lies were necessary to justify the shooting of their parents. On March 20th, after 4 days of deliberation, the jury convicted the Menendez brothers of 2 counts of first-degree murder each, and conspiracy to commit murder and special circumstances. The penalty phase lasted about a month, and on April 17th, 1996, the jury recommended life in prison without the possibility of parole. They were sympathetic to the brothers' upbringing, but they couldn't excuse what they'd done. Before the formal sentencing, Erik and Lyle Menendez actually sat down with Barbara Walters for an interview, and she didn't pull any punches.
I'm just a normal kid.
Oh, Erik, you're a normal kid who killed your parents.
On July 2nd, 1996, Lyle and Erik Menendez were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. They were initially separated, with Lyle sent to the California Correctional Institution and Erik sent to California State Prison. The brothers are now serving their sentence at the R.J. Donovan Correctional Facility in California. The judgment in the Menendez brothers case has been appealed many times over the years and has been upheld by the California Board of Appeals, the California Supreme Court, and the United States Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. And that is the story of the Menendez brothers. You guys, this story is a doozy, and if you want more, there's plenty. There's also a lot more to this Jose Menendez Menudo story that's like pretty gross, actually, allegedly for entertainment purposes only. Also, in just a couple days from the date that this video goes live, there's another documentary coming out on Netflix. So hold on to your butts. If you have a Crue Trime story that you want to recommend to me, please fill out the Google Doc down in the description box. I would love to hear from you, and I would also love to hear your opinions about this case. Do you believe the Menendez brothers were telling the truth? Do you believe all this stuff about their dad? Tell me all about it in the comments below. Thank you so much for hanging out today and for watching this video. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this one, then consider subscribing to this channel before you leave today. I upload new videos here on YouTube every week, and you can follow me on all of the other socials as well. That is it for now. I will catch you next time in the next video. Bye! Fucking God, hello? Story that's like, babe, come on. Very specific. Erik and Lyle more? On November, nope. Excuse me. But hello, pumpkin. Liar Menendez. This face finder keeps looking at this jack-o'-lantern. That's adorable. Garage is opening, can you hear it?